Bishop Gary Langley is an overseer for the Church of God of Prophecy in Hawaii and the Pacific Islands. He is the senior pastor of Union Hawaii Church in Honolulu. He holds a master's degree in global leadership and has completed all the coursework for Doctor of Missiology at Fuller. He's a lifelong learner and loves technology. Bishop, welcome and great to have you in our lecture.
Delighted to take the time. It's a topic that I love.
We're talking with our students today about building Christian communities online and using them for digital discipleship. They'll be interested to know what gave you the idea for starting the Jude 2 forum. What difficulties did you encounter when starting and maintaining it? How did you resolve those difficulties?
Okay, Jude 2 has a controversial history, but I'll just tell you like it is. That's the best way to do it. Back in 2002, the Church of God of Prophecy, my organization, had an online forum as part of the kogop.org website. People would come on and they were trying to build that virtual community is exactly the idea behind it. But as things happen, people would come on and start asking difficult questions. They would start asking theologically incorrect questions as far as the organization was concerned. Like, why do we teach this when I think the Bible says this? And why do we hold this position when this church holds this position and they defend it this way? And they got phone calls, they got mail, they got people just like, you need to shut this thing down. And it was a period of time where I'm old. I grew up in our church culture in which you just were not encouraged to question things. You were encouraged to go along to get along, and asking probing, difficult, challenging questions was not encouraged, let's just say. And so a lot of our older pastors and leaders were not accustomed to people pushing back and saying, I don't think we have this right. We should re-examine this position. We need to look at this. So a decision was made way above my pay grade. Someone in a 3-story building in Cleveland, Tennessee, decided to shut that forum down. But one of the employees there who was part of the web operation for the church knew that I was active on the forum, and he contacted me and he said, there's nothing that says we can't start our own version of this, just like we'll just do our own. And it will have no connection officially to anybody. And I'm like, you know how to do that? And he goes, yeah, I could set it up in a heartbeat. And I'm like, sure, let's play. And so on January 29th, 2003, Jude 2 was launched. That's the birthday of Jude 2. And it quickly became a hotbed of radicals, malcontents, people who were politically incorrect, people who questioned everything. And it grew to a real genuine community. And you got to remember that this was before Facebook. Facebook didn't exist until February of 2004. And Facebook really started, you know the story. Facebook started as a couple of college students wanting to find out who the cute girls on campus were. So they started posting pictures and, who is this girl and all that stuff. And it really didn't open up to the public until like September of 2006. So 3 years after Jude 2 was this outlet. There was no Facebook outlet for all. Facebook's the Wild West now. If you want to stir up a controversy, just post anything on Facebook and you'll be piled on by 100 people who disagree with you. They'll tell you why you're wrong and evil and all that. But Jude 2 served this. It was I saw it like a pressure relief valve for all of this pent up question and pent up desire to think, surely I'm not the only one in this organization who thinks this way. There's got to be other people out there like me. We just don't know each other. We don't talk to each other because it's like, shh, don't bring that up. You shouldn't be talking about that. And so as soon as we launched it, it just like it took off. And it wasn't very long till we had hundreds and hundreds of people who had logged into this thing and made a profile to post on Jude 2. And it was a little bit Wild West. There were crazy people on there. There were angry people on there. There were some people that you thought like, I don't even know about this person. But it did become a genuine community. People started to share things that were going on in their life, prayer requests, and people would begin to pray for one another. We learned about people's struggles, who was ill, who was who had a bad diagnosis, someone who was in a traffic accident, and everybody would jump on. And it became such a genuine community that when we would have our international assemblies in whatever town it was, we started having Jude 2 dinners. And everybody who logged on to Jude 2 would show up at these dinners just to meet each other in real life, because they wanted to see the face behind the username and all that. And it became hilarious, sort of a camaraderie between people who all loved our organization, but we saw the warts. We saw the areas where the emperor had no clothes, and we wanted to say, hey, maybe we need to take another look at that. That's not probably exactly biblical position and stuff. And they had no outlet until. So one of the, I guess, the high points, the crowning achievements of Jude 2, there was an international assembly, and I was trying to think back about this. I think it was 2006, but I can't be sure. Where there was some really tense debate on the floor of the assembly over some modification to our stance about remarriage after divorce, and all of those issues that every church has been struggled to deal with. And I was late that morning to get down to the hall. So I had it on the television in the room. It was the conference hotel, and you can watch the thing from the floor. And I get a call saying that, hey, we need you down here. Where are you? And I'm like, I'm still in my room. They know you need to get over here, because we got a note from the general overseer that he had seen this post on Jude 2 citing this historical assembly ruling that's pertinent to this debate, but he can't find it right now. Can you find it and extract that post and get it so we can give it to him? So I hurried and I found the thing and I got it down to the floor and I handed it to them, and I saw him slip a piece of paper and he read this assembly ruling from, I don't know, 1918. I don't know when it was. It was like way, 100 years ago or something. He read that into the record, and I thought, this is a pretty proud moment for a bunch of renegades who were criticized as troublemakers. We actually helped change the course of an assembly debate by open dialogue. And that open dialogue is what fostered the community, because we took all comers and we never shut anybody down or censored anybody, even if what they said was just like way out in left field somewhere. We allowed them to say that and voice that, and we would pile on people and say, no, you're wrong, and here's why. But that sense of open dialogue is what created the camaraderie and the community. And I'm still really good personal friends with some of those people that I met through Jude 2, what is it now, 17 years ago. And some of them still call me their digital pastor. I get prayer requests. I'll get a text message from somebody in Texas saying, hey, my daughter got this really bad diagnosis, and you're my online pastor. You're my digital pastor. So I'm just calling on you for prayer. And I get people seeking me out for counseling and mentoring and stuff, because that community became more than just usernames on a forum. I've been invited to come and speak and teach at some churches led by some pastors who met me on Jude 2, and they said, if you're in this area, can you come and speak at my church and stay in my home? And virtual community becomes real community if you will allow it to be.
Listening to you and knowing a lot of churches just trying to survive in the digital world, I cannot escape the thought that the church on the internet is often a follower, not a leader. In your case, you were able to turn things around and lead a community of believers to influence and even change the world around them. What are some of the challenges for the church and ministry effectively in the digital world today?
I think some of the major challenges are that entire thing of how do you build virtual community when you're thousands of miles apart. We had people from, Some of them I had never seen and will never see. And how do you establish a relational connection, a genuine relational connection? And I think, and just my experience here, there's been this pendulum swing. My generation came of age. Like I said, I'm 70 years old. I have no problem telling you my age. My generation came of age before the emergence of smartphones. You know, there were no smartphones. There were no mobile phones when I was growing up. You had a wall phone in the kitchen with a 10-foot cord, you know, and all that. The iPhone wasn't introduced till like the end of June in 2007. And the internet wasn't really a thing until like 1983, and it wasn't really publicly available till 1991. And social media didn't come along till like 15 years later. And I think people of my generation were just so amazed and astonished by the rapid growth of this virtual community, this connectivity and all this stuff. And we adopted it, and we just jumped into it. You know, we loved it. But a lot of the people in my generation were not early adopters because they weren't digital natives like the people who have never lived pre-internet. My children are both in their mid-30s, and they have never known a time in their remembrance when there was no internet. There has always been an internet for them. It exists. They're digital natives. And last night I was at a meeting at my church with some leaders, and we were just standing around talking after the meeting, and I watched a 2-year-old get mom's iPhone, unlock it, and take a picture. That 2-year-old is a digital native. She completely gets technology. But I watched over the years as parents and then grandparents joined Facebook, and the younger generations left Facebook because then it became an old people's thing. And they went to Instagram, and they went to Twitter, they went to Snapchat, they went to TikTok, they go to another platform. They keep moving as my people, my age group invades their space. They keep moving to find a private space where the old people aren't in. And so back to the question of our virtual communities and relationships, real community. You know, Facebook friends, Instagram followers, is that really community? And I don't think virtual connections can ever completely replace genuine in real life, face-to-face community. I think, you know, that will always be prime. But I got like I'm right up pushing the 5,000 friend limit on Facebook, you know, bumping right up against that. I looked the other day because I had a bunch of friend requests I hadn't responded to, and I said, how much space do I have? I'm up, you know, I got like room for 7 or 8 more people, but I only really know a few hundred of those people. But I've interacted with a bunch of them for a decade, and I feel really connected to them. I know all about their lives. I watched their children grow up. I watched them change jobs. I watched them go through, recover from cancer. I watched them struggle with their faith. I've helped some of them struggle with their faith in private messages back and forth. And I realized during all this COVID-19 stuff that we've recently been struggling with, when churches were restricted from meeting live, that certainly virtual church became this vital link. And we've been streaming our services live for 12, 15 years, just because we have transient population in Hawaii. We have people who come and they're part of our church, and then they get a military transfer to another location, but they have a heart connection. They want to stay, watch the services and all that. We have people who are caring for elderly relatives and they can't come to church. We have people who job situation. So we've been streaming for years, and all of a sudden I have all these people contacting me going like, hey, so how do we do this streaming thing? How do we do this? They had, in the past, they had criticized, you know, video church as being some sort of a negative stereotype, and then suddenly it became vital to them. And I had a pastor from rural South Georgia who contacted me, and he said, I so envy what you're able to do. I pastor rural elderly congregation in the South. Most of my members don't even have a computer. They have no internet access. They don't even own a smartphone. And I feel suddenly crippled because I can't do what I see all of you folks doing, where you're able to have a Zoom meeting and get everybody together. You're able to stream your service on a platform that allows a chat thing, so you're interacting during the service. And we found, that this whole idea of virtual community became real community really fast, because because of government restrictions, it was the only community we were allowed to have legally, that we could have.
So, digital discipleship that remains personal, where do we draw the line? What can be done online and what can't?
There's not a single answer to that in my mind. I think I could probably argue for both sides of it and make an effective case for and against, but you can't. The argument would be you can't fully disciple a new believer on the internet outside of personal interaction, because there's this aspect of discipleship that is best seen and carried out through modeling actions and behaviors for the disciple to follow and emulate. There's the issue of how do you baptize a new believer that is in another area. How do you have virtual communion? All of those things. But I mentioned earlier, I have virtual relationships of over a decade, and some of them have been people who followed me so closely on social media posts that they feel connected, that they see me as pastor, mentor, advisor, counselor to them, long distance pastor. And those relationships are real to me. They're very real to me. I take that as seriously as the person that I shake hands with at the back door of my church when they're coming or leaving my in real life face-to-face church services. So yes, is it different? It's of course different. If I can go back to when we were streaming church, we had to rethink how we did church when we streamed our services, because we didn't want them. I mean, it's not like watching America's Got Talent and you're sitting there going like, wow, that was really good. Oh yeah, that was good. We changed. So we use the online church platform that has a chat box to deliver the content. And we changed our engagement methods, knowing that everybody was watching, sitting in their living room, probably in shorts and a t-shirt or their pajamas, and maybe they're eating, got a cup of coffee, and well, they would have a cup of coffee at my church anyway, but they're pretty relaxed. But the atmosphere was different. The delivery had to be different. So we started including things in there like, we're about to pray right now. We believe God is our healer, and we're about to pray. And there may be people in your living room right now who are sick. Would you just type in just a one sentence, what is going on in their body that we need to be praying for right now? And we had somebody monitoring that live, and they were saying, yes, there's someone who had an accident and their hip is displaced. Yes, there's someone here who's suffering from migraine headaches. Yes. And this was real live interaction. It was going on in real time. And then when we prayed, we said, if they're right there in the living room with you, if you can lay hands on them, if you can touch them right where you are. So we bridged the digital community and the actual community as best we could. We started to include things where we would say, would you repeat this after us right there in your living room as we say this? We're going to pray this prayer. We're going to make this affirmation, and we want you to repeat it right there in your living room. And we had people who said, wow, that was powerful for me to speak those words in my home, not in the church, but in my home. And so we have to rethink perhaps how we package what we're doing as far as digital discipleship, because the message never changed, but the packaging has to change. We have to learn how to reformat the truths that we're teaching into a way of delivery that can reach them.
Well, in this case, how can we minister to a generation that can tell right away if we the church are real or not? What are some of the most effective ways your church or ministry uses technology to reach, connect, and network with people?
Okay, so I think you've probably experienced this. I know I have, where you've heard a prayer request from somebody, a missionary or someone in another country a long way away, and they've requested prayer, and you've prayed for them 5,000-10,000 miles away, and you get a report back later that they said, at this date and this time, I felt God move, and I knew that someone was praying for me. that's distance ministry, no less than internet related ministry. We just haven't thought of it that way before. But think about how this has changed. Now, it used to be a missionary in another country would write a letter, and 2 weeks later it would get somewhere, and somebody would start praying and respond, and it would take them a month later. They would get stuff back and everything. And now it's instantaneous. You read my list of what I do at the very start of this. I oversee churches in some tiny little Pacific Island nations, tiny little Pacific Island nations. I've gone to places that didn't have running water or electricity. I went to an island that literally it was like stepping back in time. And I had people come up to me and hold up their mobile phone and say, Facebook. They wanted to be my Facebook friend. I'm like, how do you have a mobile phone here? There's no electricity. How is this even possible? They're charging them with like solar panels and stuff. It's changed everything. The internet connectivity has changed everything. During this period of isolation, our tiny little small middle and high school group was not functioning, and it was rebirthed during isolation as a Zoom group. And those kids, some of them had never seen each other face to face until last week when they got to come back to church together. One of our leaders is a young middle school teacher. She's extremely tech savvy. She's been able to leverage this sense of one-on-one meeting, but one step removes safety. And let me talk about that. The internet's a dangerous place. It's a dangerous place because you can hide behind a username and a login. And so you can say things that you would never say to someone face to face. Somebody will say something highly offensive and angry to me online because they're a keyboard warrior. But when we meet face to face and we're sitting at Starbucks and we're just talking, they're like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that. I'm really sorry, because now I'm a real person to them. The flip side of that, though, however, is that there is some safety in being one step removed from being face to face. And sometimes, especially younger people, because they're digital natives, they will open up and say things to you in a chat. They will say things in a text message that they would never tell you face to face sitting across the table from you. And so you have to leverage the good parts of the technology, chew up the meat, spit out the bones, Yes, it's a Wild West. There's awful people on there. There's anger, there's hatred, there's all sorts of stuff. But I read a statistic, and I should have looked it up. I think the number one search thing on the internet is probably pornography, and the number two is faith and God. So it's the dark and light side of the same tool being used for good and evil and all of that stuff. For me, one of the things I've tried to do is to live a very transparent life online. If I'm going to establish a relationship, I can't preach to people all the time. It can't be one-way communication, the sage on the stage, downloading all of this wonderful theological information to you. I want them to see my life. I do a lot of Facebook Live stuff sitting out on my deck out back out here, where they see how I live. They see me in my Mickey Mouse t-shirt and my shorts, and right out here where I live. And I think especially younger generation, community for them is transparency and reality. They want to see you as a real three-dimensional holistic person, not as just a leader. And so I've tried to allow people in my world, they've seen the messiness of my life, they've seen the struggles of my life, and they can smell a facade, they can smell a fake a mile away. You can't fake it with younger people. They place a real high value on honesty and openness. And I was thinking about this because I preached last week from John 4, the Samaritan's woman story about Jesus going into Samaria, a place where Jews didn't normally go because those people, the Samaritans, those people, they didn't want to go through that place. And he's going to have this encounter with this woman at Jacob's Well, and it's not by accident that he picked Jacob's Well, because the Samaritans revered Jacob as part of their ancestry, and the Jews revered Jacob as part of their ancestry. And so what did Jesus do? He met this person that he had nothing in common with. She was a female, she was a Samaritan, but he met her on a place of common ground. He found this place that both of them had respect for and revered. And he said, yeah, I'm going to have this encounter right here. And he sent his boys away, because they were Jews and they were prejudiced. He sent them away and told them to, go get me a sandwich and come back later. I got to do something here. And so I'm thinking about what's the common ground that we have with the non-church society. It's YouTube, it's Vimeo, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's whatever platform it works for your context. But you use that, and you use it responsibly, and you use it transparently. You don't try to go on there and put on a PR move and put on a fake front, but you just come on there as a real human being who has hopes, fears, dreams, wishes, anxieties, all of that stuff that's real. And you let them into that space, and that gives you permission to speak into their lives with genuine heart. The real pure heart motive. You're not trying to sell them anything. You're not trying to beat them over the head with your religion. You're just trying to be a part of their life.
Thank you so much. Give us, in conclusion, you already mentioned few resources, platforms, social media. Give us, just for the past, let's say 3 months, how did you survive, you and your church? Give us the top 5, and if you go top 10, that's fine. Give us the top internet digital tools that you used, and that any other pastor could take today and use them for the same reason.
Right. Okay. So you need a YouTube account. You need a Vimeo account. Both of those are content delivery systems for longer form video. I use Facebook extensively just because it's the ubiquitous tool. It's like electricity and running water. Almost everybody seems to have it. So I use Facebook Live often, and I pick the time of day, usually midday for me, which is around the end of day for everybody on the East Coast and the middle of the United States, so that that's when a lot of people are off work and they're checking their Facebook and they're eating dinner and they're relaxing at home. And so I try to time those for that. And I try to keep the content varied on that. I don't preach to people. So Facebook, Instagram, and like I said, my Instagram is basically, I follow people who are way smarter than me and repost what they posted on Instagram. I've got a few people that I really like what they post, Sean Foyt and a bunch of people who are just really, really young, amazing young leaders, and I see their stuff and I go, man, that's good stuff right there. And I repost it, put it in my Insta story, and every now and then I'll throw in a little humorous meme, because I love memes, and I throw those in to keep it real, because that's that's my personality. That's who I really am. For the church, we have a website, because it's obligatory. You need a website. You just got to have a website, and we have a website, and that has a contact form where people can find us. We use Vimeo for our pre-recorded and live stream services, and we deliver them with the online.church platform. And we do that because it has that chat stream right beside the video box. And so that helps us to be immediate and use that to connect with people in a real live interactive format. So it's not just, hey, here's a video we did of our church, you need to watch this video, which is, for us, doesn't work at all. And I used text messaging extensively. I use text messaging. So, I mean, those are kind of my big ones. Those are my main ones. I use most of the social media platforms everyone else uses, plus StreamYard, which I mentioned earlier, that I use for producing and delivering content that's more formally produced interview stuff. And one of my members runs an online, he's doing an online school of worship that starts in 10 days. And he used StreamYard with me, interviewed a bunch of the major worship leaders from all of the, Bethel Music and Upper Room and all these people, and did those interviews. So we used it to produce content that's really high quality for that. And I'm so thankful to live in this age. I could have been born 50 years earlier and missed all of this opportunity to do all this stuff. But God was so gracious to allow me to live when we have this beautiful opportunity to go beyond our little town or our community or our region. And you know, you can click on your phone and you can be talking to the world, to the entire planet. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate you giving us these words of wisdom and testimony. So great. I appreciate it very much. And I have a feeling when we present this lecture to the students, there will be quite a few questions. So I'll be emailing you those.
You can give them my email address. It's fine.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Very gracious of you. Thank you so much. Dr. Michael Carter is the lead pastor of the Well Church in Toledo, Ohio, and Kingdom Empowerment on the campus of Bowling Green State University. He's been pastoring for over 20 years in 3 different states, and as a scholar, theologian, leader, and an urban thought architect, Dr. Carter specializes in homiletics, church growth, social justice, and discipleship strategies. Today, we are talking with him on forming Christian communities online and using them for digital discipleship. Dr. Carter, welcome. Thank you for taking the time. Good to have you on our lecture.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me with you today. I'm excited to speak with you, and hopefully it's a blessing to you and those watching.
Just to establish context real quick, describe your work with the church and community briefly.
Absolutely. You know, I think you summed it up well in the introduction. I've been pastoring for over 20 years, somewhere around 22 to be exact, 23. I've pastored a couple of different churches. I've pastored in Detroit, Michigan, Inkster, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. I've overseen about 22 churches most recently, even right now, still overseeing some churches in the Midwest, Southeast of the United States, a couple out of the country. Like I said, teach homiletics and social justice. So I'm just a thought architect, one that just helps to push thought forward. It has been my desire to do a lot of work in our community for not just church growth, church development, church strategies, but also community activism to help establish the church as a current and modern day voice of Jesus Christ.
So on building Christian communities by reaching people outside the church via internet technologies, whatever available to us, give us briefly your description of your process, general flow of people via live broadcasts, texting, apps, church management platform.
Absolutely. Hopefully, maybe I can take a step back first and give some context, and then hopefully I don't derail your question too much. But I think this is very important, especially for students to identify. Because to me, there's 3 different cores that you must understand, right? Because we've been talking about digital discipleship, and I'm sure in class you'll define that. But you have discipleship, you have spiritual formation, and you have assimilation. And we have to determine which of the 3 we're actually doing, right? Which activity are we actually trying to move down the pipeline? That helps us to determine what we're doing. What are we using? How are we using it? Why? The why. That's the big question. Why are we using this particular vehicle, and what do we hope to accomplish from it? That has to be done by identifying if it's spiritual formation we're after, discipleship we're after, or assimilation that we're after. And those are 3 distinctly different things. But I think sometimes it gets just tossed under the umbrella of discipleship, and it's not. And so once we have identified what we're doing, we have created pathways within our own church to help us understand how we're going to use each technology to move people down the pipeline. So once we have identified what it is we're actually after and why, that makes a whole lot of sense for us, right? So really, really simply, you know, we'll take, for example, once you have those buckets, you may say, okay, I am looking to make sure a person is integrated into the fabric of the church. They have come through the online community, whether it's the website, Facebook, they've seen the service, they're watching me preach. How do I then move them into the next phase of the funnel, right? So for me, that's assimilation first. I have to capture them, okay? So, you know, we're trying to get them into the CMS system. So our church management system, whether that's, you know, for us right now, we're moving to Breezes. I don't know if I even told you that in our last conversation. We're moving to Breezes for several reasons. First and foremost, so everyone knows, cost, right? It's $50. It never changes.
Right.
Right. So you're trying to cut down on costs, right? Because all of these technologies have some form of a price tag associated to it.
That's right.
So we're moving to Breezes. So we're not using a simple church anymore. We're not using CCB. We're going to a Breeze, the CMS system. So we understand when we put them into the system, we have to create pathways even in that system in order for it to work as this digital discipleship. Because on its own, it won't work. On its own, it will not disciple, right? So we use that system. We put them into the CMHS system. Now, there's a couple of different ways we've decided that that input would happen. So it can happen through them watching us on social media and we're capturing the name and connecting with them. It can happen because they said they prayed at the end of a service. It can happen because we use text in church. So they may text the word join to us, or they may text the word social. Social is less offensive. Right, Donnie, you get it. Join. I don't know if I want to join yet, right? But right. Social meant, hey, we just want to connect with you for more community. So they text the word social. It gives us their phone number if they fill it out properly, their email address, their name, and their number, right? And sometimes on some of the forms, we initially send back and ask for an address when we connect them to a group. Hey, can we, not the address, but the birthday. I don't need the address right now. Birthday. Right? So I want their birthday, their phone number, their email address, and their name, right? So now I can put that into my church management system, and that allows me to begin to start the process of discipleship, right? But I'm still going from assimilation to spiritual formation, and that's just really kind of, how we begin to look at things. So then we look at personal development tools, such as a scripture of the day, and so we look at what tool can give us that scripture of the day. For us right now, Text in Church still does that, because we can schedule it for the next year if we want to, that every Thursday it sends a scripture. Every Wednesday it sends a scripture. So we're able to connect that scripture verse. So now we're looking at the spiritual formation process, right? And are we able to then do things, raffles and giveaways, to see if that verse can be done online in a type of way, right? But then we look at discipleship. And then when I look at discipleship, I'm looking at things such as Facebook rooms, right? So we know we got Facebook, but then Facebook rooms right now, Donnie, is great. I'm going to tell you, because it allows you to bring people in to an environment together in a community. It's private to some degree, but allows people to connect right within the social media sphere that they're comfortable and used to. But I know who I'm talking to. I know I'm talking to Don Joe. I know I'm talking to Gail Smithers, right? I have that information. It allows us to start to connect with each other. It allows us to start to follow each other. It allows us to build relationship. We get to do the doing of discipleship because the tool has made that possible.
We're taking something very, very personal, taking it to an audience that can identify with it, and it is our attempt that they connect with and respond. This is important, but in the whole process, numbers are important as well. A small church pastor would want to know, what is my return? Can I justify the investment in digital discipleship? Is it measurable? Is it practical for my church?
That's a tricky step, Donnie, because I think it's fluid, man. I think it's very fluid in identifying what works and what doesn't work in this stage. And we're trying a couple of things right now, even that I think are instrumental in working for our ministry. As far as what's working is getting people involved. So I think Text in Church, listen, I'm not a sponsor for them. I make no money from them.
Of course.
I used them when they first came out, stopped using them, and went back because I saw the fall off. Okay. This was on the ground. I saw the fall off on the ground from when we used it versus when we didn't use it. I also see it in the digital space because we've tested, hey, let's not use it for this week. And we watched our numbers crash. Like our viewership numbers crash tremendously. I mean, nosedive, why are we open crashed? Wow. But when using it, that number is up because it keeps them engaged. Mm-hmm. They don't realize it's not my number. They don't even realize they're not talking to me most of the time because the team is sending text messages out, but also they'll send one out for me that says, hey, this is Pastor Mike. Yo, this is Pastor Mike. What up? This is Pastor Mike. Right. And it feels real personal. And there's a feature that allows us to use their name, their first name or their last name. So it can say, yo, Donnie, this is Pastor Mike. Want you to know I'm praying for you today. Right. Tell me, how can I pray for you and your family? And automatically, people are responding to that, right? It is the most incredible thing that we can do is to have people respond to us in that method. So that is by far the greatest thing we've been able to do. The second thing we've been able to do is use Facebook in a way, I think that's a little trickier maybe for some, and that is communicate with people who say they want to pray with us, join the ministry, comment with significance, right? We created a smaller group. So if you Google it, you see our church, that's no problem. But what you don't find is you don't find the private group we created, right? So we created a private group that's under a different name that people won't think about, so no one's trying to find it. And we communicate in that group regularly to those people. So even if we don't add them to the group, that's the first thing we're asking them. Do they want to join this group? And if they don't join this group, we still keep them on the communication of sending out messages. So Messenger becomes the next best thing. So I guess essentially what I'm explaining is messaging work. So here's the thing. On ground, we would call you. We would use a list, right? So now what we've done is created a digital list so that every week we're still using a digital list to contact, to send content to. And then here's something else I've done. I don't know if I told you this on the call. We're sending messaging through ads now. So we're doing ads on social media. Mm-hmm. Once I figured out who you are, once you've connected, or here's the thing, I have an aunt. She doesn't message anything. I can't see her when she's watching me, but I know she's watching me based on my mother. Hey, your aunt said this, right? So because we know she's on social media, we target her with ads. This past week, she was one of our first givers. Had never given to us. Wow. So remember our conversation before about how I measure discipleship.
Talk about that.
Remember when the disciples are out on the boat, they go fishing and the net breaks. And when the net breaks, all of the other boats who are doing their own thing have to come in and help them with that net that had broken, right? To gather what they could of the catch, because the catch was so great. Here's my analogy of that story, though. When first time they went fishing and the net broke, they weren't in real relationship with Jesus yet. So they didn't understand how to use the tools they had available to them, right? And I think that as you get revelation to what God is doing in your ministry, you begin to learn how to use certain tools a certain way. And you learn how to minimize costs, right? And you get a greater return, one that you can't handle. And so the pressure becomes, how do you determine where to invest the resources to get the most out of the return and the most out of your investment? It's hard to determine how many people are going to return. So we take a seeker-sensitive approach to digital ministry. So we take a Rick Warren approach. I won't lie to you. Cast a large net because we know we're going to get some fish, right? So cast a large net and worry about what you get, push them through the pipeline. I don't then refocus on who I got. I have a team. My wife's dissertation is in leadership, discipleship, volunteer training, right? So that process, we have someone to cover. My focus as a pastor is to go back out there and to continue to fish again. So I'm always looking at ways to invest in discipleship. So on an average Sunday, the numbers are fluctuating for us right now on who's actually watching us. They have dipped just a bit the last couple of weeks, and I think it's because we have COVID fatigue. Some churches have reopened, so some people who may have been watching us may now be doing something else, like going on ground, as a possibility as well. So we had reached up till I think it was 808 that was watching us on Sundays. Wow. So now the number has come down a bit, and so we're hovering around 630 the last couple of weeks watching us, right? Which is better than the 500 we were initially watching us. And so the number went up, came down, and I still netted more. Here's what I had to do, though, Donnie. I was showing service at our regular time, but we knew we were in the middle of a church plant, and we knew we were in the middle of changing service times. So one of the things that we did was we changed our service times to what they will be in 6 months. So all of our service times that we started airing were the new times that were coming, right? So we just started conditioning the people now. When we made the switch, people had to decide between the service they normally attend and the new service time. So here's what I found out. My new service time numbers jumped through the roof. My older two service time numbers dipped a little bit, right? The last 2 weeks, they've all leveled out. So you kind of have that dip. Here's why that's important to you. Because one of the things that I found out is you have to experiment. You have to know that, look, everybody was having church service at this same time, right? One Sunday, the whole internet was shut down for many of us at the same time. So you had to change the time. You had to play with it. Once we played with the time, we saw the numbers, our return go up. Here's another thing we found out. Monday night and Tuesday night, re-air the service. So the numbers we got on Monday and Tuesday night was higher than the numbers we got on Sunday. So once we did that, I don't even count those numbers when I talk to you. So when I talk 8, I'm literally talking about Sunday. If I add the Monday, Tuesday numbers to it, then those become mega numbers, right? And so we realized that we had to do some things differently for the numbers. But here's what I realized. We're only getting about 15% return, involvement, engagement from who's watching us. So the extra, the overflow. So if I have 200 more people watch me than normal, 15% of them will stay connected. The rest won't, right? Or it may take them some time. Yeah. I wish we could do the research to determine how many weeks does it take a person digitally to connect with your ministry. We know that in butts in the seat, but we don't know that number digitally. Cost is tricky because for us, Donnie, I think when they pulled me the last report, we're at about $500 a month total investment in digital space right now. $500 a month total investment in digital space. And it's a $500 that'll never change for us unless it probably go up because we've adopted this model now. This is our model. So even when we go back on the ground, we're going to keep a digital model. So our number went up $500. However, my giving numbers are through the roof. So even though my costs, right, my output is high, my income is higher, right? So income is at a rate that I can't explain to you from people I don't know. And that is the part that is essential. So to your class, to your point about discipleship, one of our benchmarks is $200. In our community, $200 is $200 gift is not normal, right? Somebody give you $200, they're invested. I think the average gift around here for our community was $7. So imagine how many times you would have to give me $7 to reach 200. And so we use $200 as a benchmark to determine if a person was truly becoming a disciple. And once we had identified that number, we realized that it takes a little bit of time to get to that number. Some people are going to give us 20, some 30, some 40. Once they learn tithing, they'll do more. But that's all part of the discipleship process and the content that we're creating. So we have now realized that by doing this, our benchmarks are a part of how we are addressing if this is working. Because you got to determine, is what I'm paying working or is it a waste of money? Right. Okay, so that's why we have changed some of the resources and tools we're using. So for example, we just invested into using an app. I think I might have told you that in our conversation. So we're creating this app, right? So right now we looked at, okay, what does the app cost us to create? How is it becoming the centerpiece, different than other ministries using it? How is it the centerpiece of our digital existence, our digital community, and what do we expect to get in return for it? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we did was we signed up for their giving process. It was cheaper than what we were doing. We were using Square, right? Square was better. We were using the bank at one point. Square was better, easier, simple. However, my giving provider was using Stripe. There was a 0.6 cent difference between Square and what they gave me through Stripe. I don't know how they gave me the fee. I don't really care how they gave me the fee. Donnie, it was a 0.6 percent difference. Right. That's huge on the income we're bringing in. Right. I mean, absolutely huge. So that paid for Breezes. That pays for Texan Church. That pays for Flocknote. That pays for any other thing that I'm using, right? Switcher. All of that was actually paid for when I did the math just in switching who the provider was for my giving. So I hope that kind of makes a little bit of sense of you got to watch where your money's going. But what can you expect on a return? If you're diligent and consistent, you're going to build numbers. It's probably going to be between 15 and 20%, which in a marketing world, that's gold. Anytime you put out something, flyer or anything, if you got a 15 to 20% return, you would be jumping up and down, right? And for Facebook ads, and I'll shut up. For Facebook ads, for example, we're only doing $4 or $5 a day, right? So you're talking about $20, $25 a week, $100 a month, baby. But the return on that has been much, much higher in engagement, creating a pipeline, and the giving. Because one gift, the right gift, pays for what you just did. I think we have to change in this environment what we consider membership too. I know for sure. So how we're classifying and looking at what a member is and our expectation, it changes differently. I have people who are watching me every week. They're giving every week. They're joining prayer every week. They're doing everything I ask. Are they not a member?
You're discipling them. You're leading them.
They never join officially, but they do everything a member does. You're watching me, and I know for a fact you have 2 or 3 kids at home, right? Or a husband or a spouse. We're only counting you. We weren't counting the spouse who this is. Oh, by the way, great sermon, pastor. I'm like, oh my God, you were watching, weren't you? So the number is probably much higher.
That's right.
Than what we have been accounting that number to be. The number we're looking at is the number of people that watched us past a certain point. As we determine how long they watched the sermon, that's what we're counting, right? So that number is much higher than what I'm actually giving it credit for.
Dr. Carter, thank you so much for taking the time. There is so much to be said here in this little topic, and I have a feeling that we'll continue this talk very soon.